People are using AI all wrong in their job search, and it's costing them opportunities. Hi, I'm Jane Cotis-Beyer, and welcome to the People You Meet in Old Town podcast, a show about the fascinating people who live right here in our community of Old Town Alexandria. Today's guest is Chaz Cirame. Chaz is the founder of Big Fish Recruiting, a firm that specializes in placing top talent in public affairs and public policy in their dream roles. What makes the conversation with Chaz even more valuable is that he too made a career pivot, and he shares a lot of really great advice about hiring trends, the job market, what candidates are doing right and wrong, and also how to use AI to stand out. This conversation is chock full of valuable nuggets, and so I certainly learned a lot talking to Chaz, and I think you will too. So with that, let's welcome Chaz to the show. Chaz, welcome to the People You Meet in Old Town podcast. So glad that you made it out here.
Well, thanks for having me, Jane. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. I like to start every episode by telling our listeners how we met, because it's about the people I meet in Old Town Alexandria. Do you remember?
I do. So it was almost exactly a year ago. I was at Old Town Parade Day, and that's coming up in a couple days. And it was at a party at your house. I walked in the door and with my girlfriend, and who you are friends with, and she introduced me. And so we first met probably right here.
That's right. And we're celebrating our 1 year friendship anniversary. Yes, I love it. I love it. That's so great. So we were recently chatting and just catching up with each other at St. Elmo's. And I was surprised to find out that you haven't been a recruiter for long. So this is more of a recent development for you. So we'd just love to get into your career and how you got here and how you're helping people today in our community.
Yeah. So I started Big Fish, my recruiting firm, 4 years ago. And so it's almost exactly the 4th anniversary. And that was a post-COVID career pivot. Before that, I did public affairs consulting for a little over a decade. And before that, I worked in public policy nonprofits. And originally, I got my start in politics growing up in Maine.
Very cool. And how did you decide to pivot from public affairs to doing recruiting? How did you say, okay, now I think I want to pivot and help people?
Part of the answer is I'd always been doing it. I just wasn't getting paid for it. So I'd always helped friends find new career opportunities. I always helped my employers find new employees. And I also always helped my friends' employers and my clients find new hires. And I had an experience a couple years before I started Big Fish. A friend called me looking for a new director of government affairs and said, could I help? And I said, my schedule's really packed. I don't think I can give you a lot of time. And then before I put the phone down, in that classic, if you had a receiver actually putting the phone down,
right.
And I said, well, would you pay me? And he said, yes. And I was like, oh, okay, that changes everything. So I dabbled in it a little bit before I made the full effort and started Big Fish. But part of why I wanted to change is the public affairs consulting I was doing. The way I always did that job was very much in person. And COVID took all that away overnight. And then it was very slow to come back. And I think it's still slow to come back. So a job that I'd done, there's a meme game, just describe your job poorly. And I always describe my job as I take people to lunch, I go to events, and then I nag them to do things they already said they were going to do. So overnight, all I had left was nagging. And that's really hard if you can't take them to lunch or bump into them. So I needed something different, something new. So I had a few different things in mind. I found a book that I recommend almost on a daily basis called Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. And I read that book, and the whole book's about using design thinking to apply it to making big decisions in your life. It's mostly career-based, but also just bigger decisions in your life. And there's an exercise in that called Odyssey planning, where you pick 3 distinct futures for your life and work your way backwards to how you'd get there. And I had the kind of public affairs track I was on. I had this creative project that I very much want to do, but like many creative projects, I'll put a lot of time, a lot of energy in it before it ever get me money, which I need to pay the bills. And then recruiting. And when I worked my way backwards on all three and to where I wanted to be, recruiting definitely seemed like a great option. And then part of that process in the book is to then go out and find out what you don't know that you don't know. So I talked to everybody I knew that worked in recruiting, and I said, what am I missing here? What do I not know, et cetera. And instead of discouraging me, it made me want to do it more.
That's so cool. It sounds like a really interesting book that many of us should check out. And I was just thinking as you were talking that many of us are conditioned to meet certain milestones in our life. For example, graduate from high school, get into good college, do well in college, graduate college, make sure you secure your first job out of college, get a starting salary, right? And so maybe get a first promotion, maybe go to grad school. And then you get to a point in your life, maybe mid-career, and you go, well, I've accomplished what my parents and I had talked about on my roadmap. What's next? And I think in this day and age, careers can often be unpredictable. And if you don't stop and think, you can, without that intentionality, you can get into a situation where you're in a hamster wheel, maybe perhaps doing a job you don't like, or you're not using your full potential. There was a meme that came up on Instagram. It was with Reese Witherspoon. And she was talking about how she was giving somebody advice about chasing your talent, right? And chasing, not your dreams, but chasing your talent and something you're good at. And I think for many of us, it's scary to think, gosh, how do I really pursue my talents if I am to pivot my career? So good for you for having the courage and with the wherewithal to pause and think and go, wait a second, I have to reconsider what I'm doing. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's something I encourage everybody to do, and it's been a very rewarding track for me. So
Very cool. So we hear a lot about layoffs. Morgan Stanley has laid off 2,500 people. Last week, Block has laid off half of its workforce and has blamed AI for it. They're calling it AI whitewashing. From your vantage point, what does the hiring market look like? And is it really all doom and gloom?
I don't think so. And I always tell candidates in particular, spend zero time thinking about the job market. It doesn't help you in your career search whatsoever. All you need is the next right opportunity for you. And that will happen in bad job markets with layoffs. But I would also say as many people are getting laid off, there's also a lot of hiring going on, and people get hired every day. Yes, certainly the job market's a little bit more competitive, and there are lots of things you can do to stick out, but there's never going to be a perfect time to hop in the job market. Mm-hmm. You want to be there, and you want to explore the opportunities that are right for you.
Sometimes people say, is it the buyer's market or the seller's market? Is it the candidate's market or is it the employer's market?
So I would say it's a little weird and a little bit of a mixture of both. Some of that's per occupation. Some of that is per candidate. But what I will say is there's a lot of quantity in the job market on the candidate side. It's still very hard to find really talented, really great folks. And so what you really need to do in the job search process, either by working with a recruiter or finding a contact inside the company, et cetera, find ways to stick out and find ways to show that you're able to do the job, but also hardworking, committed, and a rock star in every sort of way.
Is there a candidate that has stood out for you where they've done something so creative?
So as a recruiter, we don't always love the creative tricks, but I would actually say the way to really stand out are the really old school ways. Most employers love getting thank you notes after interviews. Mm-hmm. When we got into the job market a few years ago, that was a very standard thing to do.
Yes.
And now it's almost non-existent. Some candidates will send an email follow-up, and I always encourage candidates to do a mixture of both because decisions can move very fast, and the post office has gotten very slow.
Sure.
As well as some people aren't going into the office as much, so they might not be checking their mail at the office, et cetera. But I think if you want to stick out, if you want to show that you're very interested in the role and you're also the type of person you want to have, that handwritten thank you note is the new killer app.
Yeah, plus one that because, and I love sending notes, I have stationery. I've ordered personalized stationery for my kids. I know it sounds really bougie, but I really and truly believe in the power of the thank you. And because not everyone does it, I agree with you, you really do stand out. Even just as a friend, as a human, if you send a thank you note for a nice gesture or what have you, +1 to that, absolutely. So, Chaz, you recruit across public affairs, policy, anything else? Corporate
Trade
comms,
associations, corporate comms. A lot of our roles sort of are very, though probably half of our placements are outside of DC, including the half that are remote, or part of them that are remote. Most of the roles are very sort of DC-like. So public policy, public affairs. We do everything from filmmakers to lobbyists and everything in between.
Wow, that's a range.
But it's all in that sort of public policy space.
Okay, very cool. That's good to know. And so where are you seeing the strongest demand right now?
So in our books, we do a lot of work in the nonprofit sector. Nonprofit fundraisers are always in very high demand. If you're looking for a new career opportunity and the one that has full employment, if you're talented, nonprofit fundraising is an absolutely great one to go into.
Interesting. I never heard that. That's good to know. Okay. So let's pivot to candidates, because we talked about some of the positive things that a candidate can do to stick out. Any don'ts for candidates?
Lots of don'ts. I would say in younger candidates, there's a couple trends. One is to just being over familiar, just because, and this may be more of a networking situation than a job interview, but if somebody comes up and uses a nickname or something for somebody, don't immediately keep that sort of level of professionalism high in the interview process. And then I think so familiarity is definitely a piece of it. Also, there's a trend amongst candidates to spend a lot of time in the job interview sort of exploring the company culture. And I 100% encourage candidates to dive in and really figure out, the company culture, work atmosphere, all of those things. The best way to learn from those things is to talk to an employee or a former employee outside of the job interview process. There's this sort of trend to, I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me. And there is an element of that, but it can come off as you're disinterested in the role. And first and foremost, for our placements, for when we hire, I want folks that want my job at my company.
Sure.
And I don't want folks that are just looking for a job. And if as a recruiter, and hiring managers feel this too, if I feel like you're not going to take the job, I'm going to move on to somebody that is.
Sure. That's valuable advice, because especially as we get more senior in our careers, we're told, hey, make sure you're interviewing and evaluating and don't just say the next job. But you're right, there has to be a balance in how you come off, and there's a smart way to do it via backdoor references.
The backdoor references, meeting up with former employees, there are a ton of ways to get that kind of information. You're never going to get no company that has a bad work culture says in the interview process, hey, actually, this is a bad place to work.
Sure.
They just
it's all on Glassdoor and Reddit, isn't it? Yeah, all the water cooler conversations. Fair point. So how important is networking versus applying cold online? Because I always think of LinkedIn as sending something into a black hole. Is that right? Do you feel the same?
So LinkedIn's 100% a black hole. And I think both on the employer side and on the employee side, all you need to know is LinkedIn doesn't use LinkedIn processes to hire their employees. They use their own application they use the application tracking system that's out for sale, but it's not LinkedIn as the process. And part of the problem with LinkedIn is when you post a job to LinkedIn, they immediately push it out to a lot of folks. And sometimes being on that very front end, and then they immediately get 100 applicants.
Right.
Of which maybe none are good, but it's hard to stick out in that pile. And increasingly, both with our clients and other people I'm hearing, they are either coming to us or just sort of stuck in the process they have 1,000 resumes to get through, but it's hard for them to find the 10 that might actually be good for their job.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was a hiring manager, and it took me months and months and months to hire for a very specialized role. And my recruiter, which was an in-house recruiter, was not specialized in a topic I needed. And it just took me forever. And I remember calling through all the LinkedIn resumes late into the night. And I'm like, I can't live this way. It was just so overwhelming as a hiring manager, especially when you're not working with a specialized recruiter who can go, yep, I know the score, this fits the bill. It's very taxing.
Well, thanks for making the case for Big Fish so well.
That's right.
I think most companies are very good at hiring for their core product, right? And so if you are a manufacturing company, you are able to hire people that work the assembly line, and if you're Ford Motors, you're
Sure.
able to hire all the people that are involved in making a car, including the designers, the engineers, the sales folks, the marketing folks, et cetera, for the car piece of it. But when it comes down to government affairs or some comms roles, things like that have a special nuance to them, they tend to not be as good with that. And we actually work in-house with a lot of in-house recruiting firms to fill those voids that they don't have. So it can be a good partnership that way.
It's a great partnership. As a hiring manager, I can attest to that because, like I said, it's just overwhelming. And then you're not finding the right people. And then you just feel like, oh my gosh, it's such a waste of time and has taken so much of my energy. So, okay, so LinkedIn may not be the best for finding resumes per se, but what do you think LinkedIn is good for? And what is the best way for candidates that are out on the market today to use LinkedIn?
So it all comes down to networking and relationship building. And, I think a recruiter can help with that. Both internal and external recruiters can help with that they already have those relationships with the hiring managers. The odds of you finding a job through blindly applying for it on the internet, I've seen stats that are like less than 3%. I will tell you it's less than that. And it's because of those same things we talked about. And I always tell candidates they're looking for jobs that aren't through us, if you don't have a relationship, beg, borrow, and steal a relationship. So that may mean finding somebody, maybe it's not the hiring manager, maybe it's anybody that can introduce you to somebody at the company. If you legitimately don't know anybody, pick somebody that maybe you have a college connection or whatever the connection is and say, would you be willing to grab coffee with me? And then the ask isn't a ringing endorsement because
They don't know you.
They just met you
And
for
it's
3 minutes.
comfortable, sure.
But it is, hey, would you be willing to walk my resume over to the hiring manager? And it could be an email walk. It doesn't need to be a physical walk, but it is, hey, I met Jane. We had a 15-minute coffee. It was great. She seemed very impressive. She shared me with her resume.
Sure.
Are they willing to share it with you? And that's the ask. And that's a low friction, low bar ask. And it makes a huge difference because on the employer side, when they're looking at 1,000 resumes, they often don't even look at the stack, even though there might be 10 great people in it. They look first and foremost at the 5 or 10 that get physically walked to them.
Because great people know other great
Because
people.
great people know other great people. And
Agree.
And also it's like another level of sort of dedication to that this is a role that they really want.
That they're taking the time
Yeah.
to seek out the right person and connect them in. Absolutely. I so agree with that. And having on the hiring manager side, I can attest to this. Even if I go, oh man, I've already screened a ton of candidates. If a coworker comes to me with a resume, I have to look at it because I feel it would be disrespectful for me not to. So there is a degree of, like, even if I have my folks, right, like already like ready to go for round one, I will absolutely look at the resume and then give feedback to the person that's putting that resume in front of me because I don't want them to think I'm a rude person. So yeah, so it absolutely works from my perspective as well. So, okay, so everyone's talking about AI. And so I wanted to pick your brain about best practices for using AI and maybe pitfalls for using AI. What are you seeing in terms of trends? Maybe start at the top.
So I first saw this about 2.5 years ago. We had a role that was meant and destined to be attractive to people that were just coming out of grad school in data science. And we're getting all these great cover letters. Cover letters used to be a really good tool for employers to weed out the stack of resumes. And, at least you could see if they can write. But the cover letters weren't matching their backgrounds. So it made me a little bit inquisitive. And then so we would hop on the phone, the candidates, and screen them, and then start asking questions about their resumes or about their backgrounds and about their cover letter and what they said. And what I quickly found was that wasn't very deep. And, cover letters are very formulaic, and I have a formula, highly recommend. I'm awesome, you're awesome, let's be awesome together. But you can put that into ChatGPT and with the job description, the company's mission, and come up with a pretty good resume,
Sure.
pretty good cover letter. And then if you're smart enough, you modify it, and then you have a good final work product. But you have to be able to walk the walk and the talk of what you just sent or what you just wrote. And so that's a definitely big mistake. I think AI is going to become more and more just how we work and how we, in many ways, execute life. But at the same time, if you're misusing it, and there are ways to find that you're misusing it, it's going to be a real turnoff to employers. And so that's the new world we're in. I just recently have started getting AI applications where we have a very short, brief form. We try to make it low friction for candidates. But now folks are targeting even our little small recruiting firms application form and completely filling it out with pretty good answers and sending in resumes for jobs that they haven't even read the job description.
Huh. And so they're trying to cut foreigners in spite of themselves.
It's doing them no favors. It's doing the employers no favors.
Sure.
Employers do the same with their application tracking systems, et cetera. And those are increasingly AI powered, which goes back to our previous conversation that it's increasingly important. Network is an increasingly important part of that. And that will be how you fight the bots and how you fight the application tracking systems. The only way to be in an application tracking system is to not be in it.
Right. Good advice. We talk about human being in the loop in order to use AI safely. And this is a perfect example where you really want to make sure you're reading it and making it sound like a human, because they're not hiring AI. They're hiring a human that is making decisions, and AI is just a tool to execute on tasks, and you're paid for your decisions and your perspective. And so if it doesn't come across that way, that you're a human and you're on a cover letter, I can totally understand why that would be a turnoff. And then you think, this person's going to outsource everything to AI, and they don't think for themselves, nor can they use AI properly, right? And so how is that going to be reflected in their work product, frankly, day to day? So absolutely. So what about advice for employers? We talked about employees and what employees can do. What about employers? Have you seen maybe poor behavior from some employers and poor treatment of candidates?
So yes and yes. I will say there seems to be a direct correlation between how good both a hiring manager and a company thinks that they're at hiring, and direct inverse correlation. So if a company thinks they're great at hiring and and a hiring manager thinks they're great at hiring, there's usually some giant blind spots. And I find our best clients and our best hiring managers that we work with have some humility in the hiring process. And it is a process. And the other tip for employers is this AI wave's coming. And if you're not getting 1,000 junk resumes already, you will be. So figuring out something with that is definitely important. We try to keep the whole hiring process with our clients, and we work with them to try to make it as low friction as possible and as streamlined as possible. The way we like to work with hiring managers is we do a very in-depth, very similar to full-on job interview, and because of our specialized knowledge, we're not just doing a screening interview to the job description, right? We're actually getting into the meat of the role and their ability to do the meat of the role. But we push after that to have the hiring manager look at the resume as soon as possible, and ideally do that next interview. You can have other people on the team do subsequent interviews, etc. But a quick hop on Zoom, 30-minute phone call, yes or no, we want to move this person forward in the process, helps a lot, and does a service to candidates who a lot of employers do assignments and tasks and projects, but they apply them to a whole realm of candidates that aren't really going to get consideration in the end.
So why waste
their time?
And then it's respectful, frankly.
Be respectful of your candidates and your time, because you have to read through that stuff and all of that too. Apply the whole process to a very short list of folks that you already feel comfortable hiring.
Yeah. And then when you get toward the end, if you are the rejected candidate, I think it's important for the employer to also follow up and say, thank you for spending 5 hours with us. Here, I'm sorry you didn't get the role, right? Because sometimes people fail to do that and it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths.
100%. And candidate experience is it's something we even need to work on at Big Fish. We try to do a good job with it, but I think we can work on it more. Companies don't necessarily really realize what's at risk for them. Lots of employees that you're not hiring for this job might be a great job fit for the next job. But if you put them through the ringer in a hiring process or go dark on them,
right,
et cetera, they're not going to be excited to apply for the next job that maybe is the right opportunity.
Yeah. So on the other side of that, let's say you have a successful candidate and they're about to get an offer. How do you recommend candidates approach getting an offer in today's job market? And I think more seasoned candidates are more seasoned. They've been through many roles that they have accepted, many job processes, and perhaps not negotiated. What do you tell your candidates of all levels? Do you encourage them to negotiate in this job market, take the first offer, how hard to push? We'd just love to get your take on that.
Yeah, so I think there's no harm in negotiating within reason, but if you tip your cards to being unreasonable, that's going to be an immediate turnoff to the employer. Increasingly, with salary transparency laws and changes in that and trends, increasingly folks know a range, but also match up that range to your market value. Understand, and I talk to candidates about this a lot, maybe you are a great candidate at a large raise for you for this job, but if you go to the max of the range, everybody else you're competing with has 10 more years of experience. So just because they've advertised the range, and often for both legal reasons and sometimes silly reasons, you'll see Netflix is notorious for this, of having ranges from
they have funny numbers
from $100,000 to $999,000 on
right.
the roll, right? And no one's getting paid $999,000 for that job, and probably not a lot of people are getting paid $100,000. But they actually have that job slated for maybe it's $300,000. Have a really good understanding of both your market value and what both that employer and other employers are willing to pay for your set of experience, and also have an understanding of just the reality of the situation. So if you're made a job offer, countering with an additional 10%, maybe 20% in some scenarios earlier in your career, but if you're countering at a 40% difference, you're not working in a reality space, and employers are going to have a pretty poor reaction to that. And if you're working with outside recruiter, and sometimes even internal recruiters, they can give you real feedback on that, and it's certainly a thing to ask about them, but also do your market research too. And
sure.
We play a game with the staff where we'll send a resume around, and then we'll all write down what we think their market value is.
Interesting.
And it's great to see my colleagues also putting the same number down, or roughly the same range.
Right.
But in some roles that's easier for than others, but most resumes I can look at and understanding if they're in our sort of market and our background, I can put their salary to $10,000, $20,000.
Resume salary bingo.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I would love this game. We should play. So as you were talking, Chaz, about the legalities of the ranges on the hiring manager side, right? I also need to think about the peer set within the company at that same level. Maybe the people that have been there for 5 years and are making a particular salary. As a candidate doesn't think about this, nor obviously do they have that awareness of what those numbers are. But as a hiring manager, that's another thing that I have to think about when negotiating with a candidate is, how is this going to land internally?
100%.
And you're right. Yeah.
And I think folks, they'll see the range and they'll be like, the company's ready to pay that. And that is, on average, not true. That the company's not planning to pay the top of that range. Mm-hmm. And they're probably looking to pay somewhere, if there's a reasonable range, not $100,000 to $999, they're probably looking to pay somewhere near the middle of the range, with some flexibility depending on the market, et cetera, and where their role is located, et cetera. But there's a temptation amongst a lot of candidates to immediately ask for the top of that range. Yeah. And a feeling amongst those candidates that they're leaving money on the table if they don't ask for the top of that range. And my feedback to them is, unless that top bracket also aligns with your market value, you're not leaving any money on the table because you're not getting that money.
Right.
So understanding that, and also understanding with small employers, it's definitely like I'm a small business person. So I'm very knowledgeable about understanding my budgets and what I can do, et cetera. But sometimes people will think if they're interviewing at a Netflix, et cetera, like Netflix has all this money. Every department has a specific budget line item for each role, et cetera. They also have specific bonus pools and specific bonus budgets, et cetera. And typically in this, maybe asking for a raise internally at the company, maybe asking for trying to negotiate a job offer. Typically you getting more money depletes some of the other pool. So then they have to make the decision, is giving you more money, does that come out of the bonus pool? Does that come out of potentially other hires that we can make pool or that we need to make pool? And then also, where does that fit you with the rest of the team and what they make? And
Right.
it's a delicate balance to walk. And I think as much as candidates can put their self in the employer's shoes and try to understand that process, makes you make better ask in negotiation processes.
That's right. And as we've seen from the recent Paramount deal, Netflix knows their walkaway number.
Yes.
They have limits too. They
100%.
don't have endless pockets and a blank check for all the things.
No one has blank checks, and also everyone has a boss. And at an employer, they might have some leeway in their budget, but if they have to then justify that up to their next boss,
Right.
and if it's president of the company, they have to justify it to the board and the shareholders, and you really have to be conscious of how your ask plays into all of that.
Absolutely. So I want to go back to the resume bingo because that's really intriguing to me. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, what do you think makes a particular candidate a higher earner or ask for that top range of the salary?
So for a lot of the roles that we work on, and we don't work on a lot of technical roles, a lot of deep subject matter expertise, except public policy subject matters. So the highest earners, this is typical in, I guess, most industries, are the folks that can tie their job directly to revenue. So in many cases, that's sales. In many cases, that's business development. If in some cases, that is past experience where the work they have done has specifically contributed to the revenue of the organization. There are other places, and maybe legal compliance, et cetera, where the work you've done in the past has contributed specifically to a savings number for the organization. But those are the folks, and the folks that are excited and actively happy to be part of the business development process and part of the sales process. And that looks different everywhere, right? And sometimes that's actually being part of sales pitches, or if you're at a PR firm or marketing firm, bringing in new clients, et cetera.
Right. And you have that P&L tied to your name.
And you have P&L tied to your name. That is great job security,
Sure.
but also it's great profit maximization. If, where you want to be always sort of concerned a little bit if you're just sort of seen as a cost center.
Sure, absolutely, because you're overhead, and overhead's always easier to cut. The other question I'd love for you to opine on, Chaz, is a debate that my husband and I often have, and that is MBA. So do you think having an MBA in your resume allows you to ask for that top end of the range, or do you think it's just a nice to have?
So I would say, and I'm a big fan of grad school, but make sure you have real world experience before you go to grad school. I wish there could actually be like a law. You have to have real world experience before you go to grad school.
And some schools actually do that, don't they?
And some do, and some grad schools are catering to the sort of executive MBA further along in their career program, from the big consulting firms that were McKinsey and company that were always hiring up people that were fresh from Ivy League school to MBA to McKinsey or Deloitte or whoever, Goldman or whatever. Those people are hiring a lot less of those people fresh out of their MBA programs. And B, it puts you, and I would say, an MBA will give you a solid background that you can use for lots of different things. We see a lot of folks with a lot of different kind of grad degrees, and in many cases, all a degree does is help raise your level of salary expectations, but doesn't mean anything to the employer. And I think the MBA, are the jobs you're pursuing likely to be able to maximize the use of your MBA? And I think the answers on that is sometimes rarely. And I really push folks thinking about going to grad school to really have a hard plan of what they want to get from it and what they want to do from it. And B, if it's possible to get that experience for a career pivot, et cetera, some other way, look at and evaluate those options right alongside of grad school. And many of those options pay, right? So it's getting a job in that field. And where I see it in the DC market, most specifically, is international relations. And a lot of newly minted international relations graduates, even before the last year of sea shift changes in that space, they had a very hard time competing for those jobs because they were graduating with their international relations degree and then immediately coming up against people that also had international relations degrees, but 10 years of experience working in the international relations field before they went to the grad school. And experience always trumps education. It's great if you have both, but it's a decision you really want to make not lightly to rack up that debt. And you also want to make sure it's really what you want to do. Right. Having a degree just to put it on the wall or put the letters by your name is not a winning career path. Obviously, there are exceptions. You're not going to become a doctor, a medical doctor without one. For the most part, to be a lawyer, you need one. But most other paths are available to you if you're not a degree holder, graduate degree holder, and it may be both more cost-effective and more rewarding and a more successful route to just go and get the experience.
Yeah. Oh, that's good advice. That's really good advice. All right. So that's a lot of really good advice and context. So I'm just curious, what is the typical job search cycle like these days? Is it 4 months, longer? What are you seeing?
Every job search is different. I would say if your goal is salary maximization in the process, that's going to take longer. If your goal is the next job, and we increasingly have conversations with candidates that it's, yes, you could maximize your salary in the next role, that search is going to take longer. Or we have an employer that may be a small bump that's willing to hire you now. And so your goals and your quality of life and all of that all needs to factor into those decisions and how long it takes.
And how long you're going to be out on the job market. And insurance is also very expensive.
Insurance, I would say insurance is very expensive, but also be realistic on that. Go get a quote if you are going to be looking for insurance, et cetera.
Yeah.
If you're a single person, a high quality health plan, $700-800 a month. If you're a family, obviously that gets more complex and more expensive, but it's $10,000 to $20,000 a year. Factor that into your decision making, but don't make it your only decision making piece. Have all the information.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we covered a lot of ground, Chaz. Any parting words of wisdom for candidates out in the market now?
All relationship building, all networking.
Yeah.
Which has always been true. And the sort of old school Dale Carnegie-esque tips on this are the ones that still work the best.
How to Make Friends and Influence People. That's a good book. So now we have 2 book recommendations from you.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Are there any other books you keep on your nightstand as reference books?
So a recent reading that I did last year of a book that came out, it's called Aware by Les Sorba, who's a recruiter for the recruiting firm Hendricks and Struggles. Yes. He's a partner there. And Les, he wrote a great book called Aware and really highlighted how self-awareness makes you a better candidate. And at the level that he's recruiting for, which is in many cases CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, chairman, board members, et cetera, the awareness of both strengths, blind spots, weaknesses, et cetera, really make candidates stick out. And the candidates that don't make it through those processes don't have self-awareness.
And is the premise that if you are self-aware, you're more receptive to feedback, so you're more adapt to improving and to coaching?
That's a big part of it. And being coachable is, I think, a big part of it, but also realizing what you're not good at. And that maybe then you need to build a team around you that is good at those things.
To play to your weaknesses.
Right. And also to find a role that fits your strengths.
Sure. That's really good advice. That sounds like a good book for folks to check out. All right, Chaz, are you ready for our lightning round?
Yeah.
Okay, because this podcast is, after all, about Old Town Alexandria, and you have a home here in Old Town Alexandria, you're a local, so this would be a fun one with you. And you're a foodie too, because I've been to some really good restaurants with you and Cheryl, and so I trust your taste buds, Chaz. All right, so with that, favorite coffee shop?
Favorite coffee shop, we've met there before, St. Elmo's on Montgomery Street, North Old Town.
Very nice one. Favorite place to grab lunch between meetings?
If it's not a meeting lunch, my favorite place is Southside 815.
All right. A hidden gem in Old Town people should know about?
Bollywood Masala on King Street. It's right next to 219. And they have some of the best Indian food I've ever had. I would say it's right on par with Rasika downtown at a much more affordable price point. So you can eat there every week.
Okay, I'm definitely adding that to my list because I've not been there before. Waterfront walk or King Street stroll?
I'm from Maine. I'm a big water guy, but I'm actually gonna go for King Street stroll on this one.
All right.
I just love being out there with people, hopping into the shops, hopping into the bars and restaurants.
Awesome. Well, this was such a fun conversation, Chaz, and I think really informative for folks that are on the market now or perhaps considering a career pivot and are currently employed but are not maybe utilizing their full potential and not chasing their talent. You gave us a lot to think about, so thank you for that. And if folks want to get in touch with you, the best way is recruitbigfish.com. Is that right?
Recruitbigfish.com. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn or give us a follow there. And we have lots of good career advice. And if you are in the public policy space, send us a resume.
Amazing. Thank you, Chaz.
Thanks, Jane.